Commercial Debt Doctors is a podcast dedicated to helping businesses and business owners to achieve their financial goals and help unlock the most advantageous ways to use debt to capitalize your business. We are based in the United States, which is home to the most robust and mature debt capital markets in the world. We attempt to use the shared knowledge and experience of our many guests, friends, and colleagues to help brainstorm about the best possible solutions to certain problems and common issues that most companies face at one time or another. Whether it is a relatively young company or a mature business, no matter what the industry or geographic location, we are looking to help small to medium-sized businesses to avoid pitfalls and traps and unleash the true power of their company through proper capitalization. Each week, we will feature industry experts, lenders, accountants, attorneys, bankers, private equity professionals, and business owners who will share their real-world experience with us. We will all get the benefit of their experience and use their lessons to make good decisions related to financing and capital. This is your host, Phil Kain, and we're super excited today to have on as our very special guest, Mark Raterman from LNC Partners. Please visit lnc-partners.com for more information.
Okay.
So we're super excited today to be joined by Mark Raterman and my partner, Rick Lopez. So thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking some time to visit with us. So why don't you start by just introducing yourself, giving a little bit of your background and your firm. I know that you've had a great career starting, like we did with, bank credit training programs all the way up through Allied Capital and other things. But I don't want to steal your thunder up until present day in the world of private equity that you're living in. So why don't you start by introducing your firm a little bit and then your background.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Rick, for having me today. Really appreciate it. It's always good to see you guys and fun to have a little bit of time to chat. I'll start with my background. It starts with, and I'll try to keep it brief. I came out of school and went to New York and was working for, well, what I like to say was the old, it was Manufacturers Hanover. But when I was, it became, when I showed up for work the first day, I got hired out of school, and the first day when I showed up, it was Chemical Banks. So went through their training program, which was one of the best, I think, in the area. And it was just an amazing experience, coming out of school to really get that kind of exposure to a training program. So that's kind of the early years, and then moved over to the investment banking side. It became somewhere along the way, it came chemical, and went from chemical to Chase. And then it became JP Morgan as I was heading out towards the end of my time in New York. I got married to a girl from where I went to school. She was from Virginia, and I grew up in Northeast, but wanted to head back to Virginia with her. So we ended up coming back here, and I ended up at Allied Capital working on the principal investing side, and had a great time at Allied Capital. A bunch of really, really smart people, had a chance to really develop and understand the investing world, and grew up, I think, on the investing principal side there. And then in it was about 2009, 2010, Ares Management bought Allied Capital. And my partners and I, around that time, maybe about a year later, I actually stayed on for a little bit of period of time with Ares. Great group of folks there as well. Great to get a time to spend with them. And then with my partners today, we formed LNC. And raised our first fund, a $236 million fund. We're currently investing out of our second fund, which is a $300 million fund. As far as LNC is concerned, what we're focused on is lower middle market. And the one way, or I should say the one word that we describe ourselves is flexible, or flexibility, in a sense that we can move up and down the balance sheet. We can do everything from stretch senior all the way through controlled equity, and pretty much anything that a company could dream up, we can provide. And it really differentiates us in an undifferentiated world, in the sense that we're able to come in and customize a solution that really fits the needs of the company, maybe a situation they have. For example, one of the areas that we really excel at, and you'll see more than 2/3 of our deals are we're the first institutional capital in a company. And we can really provide this customized solution, like a generational change, for example, where mom or dad need capital for retirement and they want to pass it on to their daughter or son, and but they don't want to lose it from the family. Maybe it's been in the family for generations, and we're happy to play a minority role and also a leverage role. So it keeps it in the family, controlled by the family. The board is controlled by the family, but at the same time, you have a debt partner that's thinking like an equity partner, in the sense that if the company ever hit a hiccup or something like that, we're thinking about the growth aspects of the business from the equity side. And how we really differentiate it, when you think about it, is a lot of private equity groups have debt funds and private equity funds. Our fund, all of our investments come out of the same $300 million fund. So your debt and equity is coming out of one LP base that's thinking together on the best outcome of that investment in the company, as opposed to when you have a traditional private equity group that maybe has a debt fund. That debt fund's thinking about their LPs and the return on the debt, and may foreclose on that business in a dire situation, or they're thinking about it just from an equity perspective, and how do they push the envelope with leverage and things like that. We think about it as a collaborative approach together in one kind of company, what's best fit for the company and its success, quite frankly. So anyway, that's one of many ways that we differentiate ourselves. And again, I won't bore you with all the details, but we use that. We like to say tactical use of capital to really fit the needs of the companies, but we look for high free cash flow, reoccurring revenue, recession-resistant type businesses. So generally, it speaks to kind of call it B2B services type businesses is where we end up. Everything from insurance services to collision to healthcare. We do a lot in the compliance space. I could go on and on, but I don't want to make this the most boring podcast.
No, that's that's my job. So we'll talk about this. So because everybody's looking for the elusive founder-led company that you just described, right? Yeah. And of course, back when Rick and I met each other over 20 years ago, when we were anyway. It used to be that was the only thing private equity did was founder-led companies. Private equity firms never traded companies, but there was no secondary deals. There was, traded companies between private equity firms. But nowadays, it's a lot more common. In fact, I know some private equity firms, it's almost all they do. So talk about the elusive founder-led deal, because everybody likes to talk about it. And then, not everybody's that great at doing it. And so these aren't necessarily folks with a lot of education and pedigree. And a lot of those folks might think, man, I don't really fit in that private equity world. I didn't go to college, or I'm in an industry where it's a little rough around the edges. So how do you smooth that out? How do you guys handle that?
Well, I'll break that. I think I'll break down that question into two different answers, I guess. So there's one part where the actual strategy that I just described kind of is I don't know what the cliche is, but self-fulfilling prophecy, in a sense that by us thinking about it from a minority along with debt, not just we're just, controlled equity investors like the majority of the competitors out there, by coming in with that kind of flexible approach, what you'll see is a lot of times we might even be involved in a process of which you've got a pile of offers that are all competing on value. And then you've got us sitting over here with this kind of more unique structure. And you'll see, owner operators where they'll step back and go, wait a minute, I can control my company. I can take some money off the table. I can get a family member out of the business or whatever it is. And this is something I never even thought was available to me. And I can get all the benefits and tools that come with private equity, to help those businesses grow. And so to us, a lot of times what happens, to answer the first part, or to answer the question in the first part, I should say, is that you'll see a lot of these companies will gravitate towards that flexible capital, are institutional owners. And what we love about it, and the self-fulfilling prophecy side, is it's more of a self-selecting process, in a sense that these are folks that want to roll a majority of their capital back into their business, and they want to bet on themselves. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the best diligence you can ever do, is somebody that's, started the business or has been living with the business for decades, is wanting to continue to bet on themselves, is a great vote of confidence for us, especially when we go into our diligence processes. And then the second part is, what we like to say is, we find really just tremendous CEOs. We are CEO centric. I should say CEO. We are management centric investment firm. We focus on, like real estate. It's management for us. We're not scratch and dent turnaround guys. And so to us, we look for those exceptional management teams where we're looking to make an investment behind them and grow the business behind them. We're not looking to have them switch out, in any respects. And so what that entails is us trying to make sure that we've got the right fit. And what does that mean? A lot of times to a lot of private equity coming from pedigree backgrounds, we're all usually pretty highly educated. I'm proud of where I went to school. I went to University of Virginia, but to me, it's not about finding a bunch of folks that went to University of Virginia or went to an Ivy League. We have plenty of that on our staff, and we don't hold that against them. But at the same time, that's not a box that's checked for us. That really, what we look for is people that know how to run their businesses, and sometimes that includes folks that don't have a formal kind of that pedigree Ivy League background. And if you got a minute, I can tell you a story too that I think is just inspiring, and at the same time maybe a little funny. Is one of the investments we made in is a collision repair business, and as you can imagine, the line folks, the techs that are working on those cars come from definitely a different background. They're not the most formally educated, though they're some of the smartest people you could ever meet as far as learning, learning from kind of common sense, if you will. And the CEO that we backed came from an extremely different background. Here's a guy that when he was 6 years old, his parents died of drug overdoses, and he was put in a foster care system, and he had to fight his way through foster care. And when I say fight his way, I'm talking literally fighting his way through foster care and things like that. And he had a decision to make at a young age of something that I can't even relate to, with two supportive parents growing up. But he had to face a time where he was either going to end up like his parents and was facing jail, or he was going to put himself on the right path. And what he did was able to kind of turn himself around, got a job working in collision repair, started working for one of the big names, started sweeping floors, literally picking up trash, sweeping floors, and watching people fix cars. And he turned that into becoming a tech. And then he realized, I can do this better than this big company can do it. And so sure enough, what does he do? He gets his first location, and he realizes, I can't afford the rent and for the location and to live in my apartment that he currently was living in. And so he gave up his rent in his apartment, moved into the floor in his shop, and started fixing cars. I mean, in fact, there was one early stage where he worked out of a garage of a friend's, and the compressor that he was using kept blowing the fuses in the house. And then the neighbors came to the friend and said, you can't have all these cars parked out front. And they called the police on him. So he had to move. And he finally had to get that lease of where he had to give up where he was living. And anyway, it's an amazing story. So he goes and does that. And I mean, there's stories on top of stories. He was approached by this person came into his shop and said, you know what, I think the entire car needs to be painted. Would you mind painting this car for me? And this is back when he had nothing, just a little shop. And he said, well, that's a $10,000 job. I can make a lot of money, but it's the wrong thing to do. You can't put this kind of paint on top of this paint. It's going to crack and it's going to peel and it's going to look terrible. And you're going to spend $10,000. If you want to do it, you tell me you want to do it, but I want you to go into this with your eyes wide open. And he does the right thing. And the person says to him, I work for the border control, and we maintain the fleet of border control, and we were testing you. And by the fact we had heard about you and the fact that you were doing a great job, but we wanted to see if you were going to bite on this. Here's a fleet of cars that are going to constantly need to be fixed and properly maintained because of your honesty. I mean, there's stories and stories like that. There was another one where a guy walked in and said, my daughter cracked up our car, and could you fix this? Because everybody else in town is telling us it's got to replace the door. You got to do this. And he's like, no, we can do this for much cheaper, and we can do it the right way, and it'll actually last longer. And I'm not a tech, as you can tell, but he does that. And the guy goes, do you know who I am? And he said, no, you're just a customer. You're one of my customers, so you're important to me. And he said, I am the second largest State Farm agent in the entire state of Arizona. and I'd like to start talking to you about a contract with State Farm, because this is amazing work you did for on my
Wow.
behalf. And so this is how a guy like that got started. So guess what? He grows from 1 location to 10 locations. Then we invest in the business. In the last 12 months, we've done 12 acquisitions. The business has gone from, about 20 million in revenue to 100 million in revenue today. It's gone from 10 locations to 42 locations, from 2 states to 6 states. And this is all done by an amazing individual who is just, just living the American dream, and a
Yeah.
guy who was facing, quite frankly, as a teenager, without parents, without that, guide that, many of us have been blessed with. He's been able to build it into something that's just amazing, where we're sitting today. And so you talk about a different background. There's a classic example of a guy where I don't even know what his education is. I think he's got a GED, or maybe he graduated high school. I don't know,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
So,
But
so
he's got
what?
that hard knocks kind of experience.
Yeah, if I'm hearing you right, it's integrity trumps education, and you could be the most educated person in the
Not
world if you don't
99.
have integrity, it's not going to work.
Well, what was it? And I'm going to screw up this, so I'll be careful. But Warren Buffett, years ago, I don't know, somebody wrote a book about him, but it was one of the books, that many of the books that were written about him. But he said there's 3 things when you look for when you're hiring a person. He goes, you look for energy, you look for intelligence, and you look for honesty. I think he said integrity. And he said the funny thing is the first 2 things become extremely dangerous without the third.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, the number one thing you got to look for is somebody that's a straight shooter, that's got high integrity, but
Yeah.
obviously understands their business,
Yeah.
and by the way, he's really young too.
Yeah.
He's in his 30s, and he's just doing great for us.
So
Anyway,
now I'm gonna put you on the spot. So
sure.
how do you figure out, does this person have the integrity and honesty and grit and determination that we're looking for when you sign an LOI in 90 days of because of course everybody's got to we got to close in 60 days, got to close in 90 days. So how do you do that? I mean, how do you know? How do you
So,
figure that out?
so it's not perfect. I mean, I like to say I'm perfect, but my wife reminds me that's not even close.
I got one of those wives too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what's missed on a lot of times, and this is so basic, and this is not earth-shattering, probably waste of time here. Maybe you'll edit it out later, but and that is, you got to do your references. And
Yeah.
what we found with that individual, for example, is when we did our references time and time and time again. I talked to the State Farm agent. I
Yeah.
talked to the guy that really got him started, and it's been with them for going on 10 plus years. Actually, it's like probably going on 15 years. And I talked to him personally and said, what happened? And he told me the story and backed up the story that the CEO had told me. But then he said, let me tell you a bunch of other stories. And what you see is you get people that give references, that take their time, and it's nice because they say, okay, this is a supplier of mine, or this is a friend of mine. I'll give you a reference, and they go through the motions. And then there's other people that are calling you back right away, that are setting the time aside, and then all of a sudden they're telling you all these other stories that you didn't even ask about, and they're saying, you're not asking me the right questions. And I always go, well, what are the questions? He goes, no, you don't understand. Here, let me tell you about this. Here's another example. And that's when you start seeing a story put together, and it fits a pattern. And then I think we did 10 references, just for example.
Yeah.
Maybe more, so double-digit references, and where you saw was every single one was the same. It was not the same reference. It was different stories, but it was put in different ways, but it was the same conclusion, that this person has high integrity. This
Same
person
theme.
won't quit. They'll put the customer first. This is somebody we trust, beyond, to put our customers in front. And you think about collision repair, for example, not to turn this into a collision repair discussion, but we're providing a service of which our customer is the insurance company, but because they're the payers, right? But their customer is being entrusted with us.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have a bad experience, it's something they don't control, because they can have a bad experience with us. And so think about that dynamic. They're paying the bill. They want their customer to look great. And we're sitting there having the interaction front and center with them. And so it's a really critical experience, I think, where people don't rely. It's a B2B sale, but you've got a consumer of what you're interacting with. So it's a really neat business, but I can tell you stories that go on and on. But to answer your question, it's really just about making sure that, in addition to background checks, we do all those things, but really it's, you kind of put these different pieces together and you see kind of a story form before your eyes or on your paper, I guess, that really fits the bill, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Rick, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, I think it's anytime you're doing diligence and your testimonials and you hear those recurring themes, it really jumps out at you and it's powerful. And it's obviously when you hear a pattern like that, it's why you do that basic blocking and tackling and the diligence. So that's a great example.
I'll give you one other story on a completely different case many, many years ago. So nobody could ever find this. I mean, like literally goes back decades. Okay. Working on a deal. And it's funny, had a management meeting, and I'm not going to sit there and try to say that I knew everything. You never know. You just have a meeting and you go, okay, smart person, but didn't blow us away in the meeting. And we're doing some reference calls, and we're doing a reference call, and just it's going kind of at kind of one of those just kind of middle, nothing special. We're not really getting much out of it. It was a former boss, and one of the questions I like to ask, which is not that insightful, but I just ask at the end of it, I just said, so would you invest money in with this individual? And the answer I got back, and this was before Zoom, so I was on a phone call, and it was on a speakerphone, and I got the answer back. It was, well, I don't really have any free money today to invest. And I was like, and I kind of leaned in a little bit to the call because there's a little bit of a red flag. I go, well, let's assume my company gives you money to invest with this individual, so you're flush with cash. And, so like took that off the table. Would you invest and back the CEO? And there was this long pause, and they said, no. I go, do you have another 5 or 10 minutes that we can ask a couple more questions? And the funny thing about it is, and one of the other things too, that, or interesting thing is, what you'll do is in these reference calls, and again, not to turn this into a reference call, cheerleading event, but it's more about, you ask, well, do you know anybody else that's more qualified to answer that question, or things like that? And then you get the references that were not on the record, and you start getting able to dig into people that, and sometimes you got to delineate between, look, we're all not perfect. I mean, I hate to say this, but there's people that you meet and sometimes you just don't click with them. And it's not to say if you have a bad experience with somebody and there's somebody out there saying something bad, that sometimes is the outlier that doesn't fit the trend, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to kind of kind of mirror your way through that process to make sure that one bad apple or one person in the chain doesn't try to kill the deal or something like that, or give a reference that really wasn't accurate. So I don't want to overplay like we make a mistake of where we allow one person and we get one bad reference and things like that. But anyway, I just want to tell you a story of where you dig a little deeper behind the references sometimes.
Yeah. If I'm hearing you correctly, and look, it's an art form to do these references and back. It's not just something that you check the box. We ran the ground ball out. We did the reference check. So this is incredibly important and especially look, as you articulated with your thesis, you're investing in services businesses. So these are all people businesses. Right. Somebody is at the core. There's a human relationship that has to happen. And if this person is, not of peak integrity and doesn't have the grit and determination to make it through, then it's going to be problematic.
Yeah, Phil, you hit the nail on the head. It's we're focused on B2B services businesses, and as the old saying goes, the assets get on the elevator and go home at night. So if you don't have, it starts with the leadership. If you don't have good management with high integrity, you're not in for a good investment.
Yeah. And that's something that can't be taught in a school. They try to teach it in school, but last time I checked, I don't think you can teach it in school. So it's just something that this person has to learn over time. And a lot of times, you learn it by making mistakes. Like, I screwed that customer relationship up. I'm never going to do that again. You learn what works and what doesn't work. So, talk about, let's pivot a little bit and and now I'm going to put you on the spot. How does it work when you're in a company already and maybe you're finding that some of those characteristics aren't there or they're lacking, in somebody in the management team or somebody that you're doing business with? That's tough, but it happens, right?
Well, like I said, we definitely don't bat 1,000 in certain, and by the way, it's extremely rare. In fact, I can't come up with one example of where it's an integrity issue. It's because another thing we do is, going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, where we're trying to align interests in a lot of cases, where in many cases we're in the minority position and management owns a significant portion and sometimes a majority portion.
Yeah.
So the last thing they're going to do is, it's not fraud or something crazy
Yeah.
like that, because all they're going to do is, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot if they do that, because the company will be have problems, and that's their company, right? So so from our perspective, a lot of times what happens is, not a lot of times, that's the wrong choice of words completely. In a few times what's happened, and maybe it's more of a couple of times what's happened, is the business goes in a direction that maybe outgrows them, or is in a different stage that outgrows them. And look, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and there's some folks that are great at startup. There's other folks that are great at when you've got a small business that's profitable and getting it to a larger business. And then there's some folks that are really great at running businesses that are larger businesses that have more of the institutional team. I mean, I go back to one CEO we plugged, and this was, again, decades ago. I like using those examples because then people can't start looking at my existing portfolio and try to pick it out. This is literally, again, decades ago. We bought a company, we invested in a company, and we're majority owner in that case, and management team was turning over. They were retiring. It was one of our ones where we felt like we had somebody in the waiting that could step in. We rarely, if ever, do that. But in this case, the existing management team, or the existing CEO in particular, was an owner operator, and he was looking to move on. I think he was in his either 60s or 70s, and it was time for him to retire. It made all the sense in the world. And we thought we had somebody that had worked for, and it was kind of more in the branding space, consumer product branding space. And they had worked for a major, I'm talking like Fortune 100 type CPG company. And so we were like, I can't believe we got this person to step into this $5 million EBITDA small business. This is an amazing opportunity to get somebody that's seen the world, done everything. And wow, how do we get this person to come on board? And what we had a problem with is in this case, he was so used to having a massive, large infrastructure and having multiple, executive assistants to VPs underneath them and everything like that. And when he got into this business, it was a struggle when it was like, yeah, we might get one executive assistant to help, but you've got to be, as I always say, well, even in our business, we're only 13 people here, hopefully soon to be 14 people. And I always laugh that I'm the guy that like cleans the, every now and then I'll rub a stain out of the carpet or something like that. Somebody drops a cup of coffee and, and things like that, to, helping run the firm as well. So it's and I think that mentality, we've grown up in, we're lower middle market focused. That's kind of where we grew up. And what you'll see in certain cases is it's more of a fit. It's not an integrity issue. We've never had that issue. It's more of a fit of where does somebody fit within the company, and does the company sometimes outgrow their skill set? So you can have the exact opposite where you're rapidly scaling, and somebody doesn't fit that mold where it's going to the next level. And then what we do is, in those cases, we'll have a really great and open conversation where it's maybe you step into a different role. You run a division where you can go back to what you're doing well or something like that. Or maybe it's, this company's outgrowing. I want to move into more of a business, a board role. And so then the idea is we just find the right role. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I love, one of my favorite pastimes. If you ask anybody, what does Mark love to do, or what does he do for free time? I love coaching. So I coach basketball, ice hockey, football, baseball, you name it. I've coached everything with my kids. I got 4 kids, and big into hockey right now, coaching a lot of hockey, takes a lot of time. But, what I always say about successful coaches and where you really move, you make a difference with these kids is you don't just go get the best athletes. That's not coaching. I got the best athletes in the area, and I all convinced them to sign up for my team and my travel team. And we kick everybody's butt and we have a great team. And all I do is sit back and watch them be great athletes. No, instead, what you do is you find athletes and the best fit for them. And so a kid maybe excel at defense, or he may excel at offense, or whatever it is. And when you think about football and all the different skill sets that's on every play and every snap, finding a best fit for them is where you can really make a big difference. And same thing goes with CEOs. It goes with anybody, your employees and who you partner with. We all have skill sets. We've got 3 partners, myself and 2 other of my partners. Quite frankly, I feel blessed to have gotten to know them early on in my career and be able to partner with them later on in my career. And, we all have, complementary skill sets. There's certain things that I'm just not as good at that Matt or Robert really excel at, and hopefully vice versa. I'm not the dead weight and just all bad stuff, but that's what it goes back to. It's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think what we find is in certain circumstances where it doesn't fit well, we try to find a role for them where it does fit well. And whether it's in a board role or whether it's a different part in the company, but those are rare, and it's usually based on a circumstance within the company is where we find that happens.
Yeah. Well, and also, you can hear the passion in your voice. I mean, a lot of this is just, passion and that never say die attitude that, like we're not going to quit, like the age old story, they ask an entrepreneur, well, how did you make it? Well, I never quit. That's how we made it. We just never quit. And you're looking for the right fit and the right group of people that are ready to join you along that journey. And hey, we're just gonna we're gonna attack this with enthusiasm and passion, and we're not gonna quit. And that's, you can hear that in your voice, and of course we know that about you because we've been working with you. So
and Phil, I think that it's just a great point of not giving up. And I think this is my shameless plug again. It comes back to our structure and how our company's set up. We focus on culture fit. We have our culture here, and we want it to fit with our portfolio companies because we're looking to be a long-term partnership. But even that flexible capital, and if you look, we all make mistakes. Every company hits a speed bump one time or another. It just inevitably. Put it this way, if you're not hitting a speed bump at some point, you're probably not pushing yourself, and you're being too conservative, and you probably gave up on growth opportunities. And the ability to have your debt partner and your equity partner be the same person who's thinking about the upside when you hit that bump in the road. We're not just thinking about a fixed income return on the debt side, and it's like, I just want my capital back. It's time to move on. You hit a bump. We got to stop this right now, and don't go for that growth or any of that. But when we have that collaborative kind of holistic approach and think about that upside, it enables companies to have bumps in the road and to be able to say, don't worry about it. We got this. We've got a strategy. As long as we have people sitting in the room going, what happened? Why did it happen? We learn from it. Let's move forward and capitalize on it.
And your interests are aligned, and you've got the foundation for a strong partnership, and that's how you work through bumps in the road and growth and operational challenges.
Absolutely. So any more questions you want to put me on the spot with? Or
well, who's going to win the game tonight? We got Kansas against North Carolina in the national championship game. So now we're recording this, so it's
well, I can tell you who I hope wins. It's funny. I really don't have a dog in this hunt, but I will say this: I'm a UVA grad. This is the first time in a long time they did not make the tournament, which much surprising, but they'll be back next year. Just a bump in a road. Tony Bennett is an awesome coach, but putting that, you talk about an awesome coach. My gosh, the things that you can learn by just watching what he does is incredible, and it can be applied to business world. But putting it aside, I'm an ACC guy because of that. So I think I'm going to root for North Carolina, and they're an 8 seed. Typically, I struggle with it because there's some rivalry going on there, but I gotta back an ACC team that's an AC coming in. But I kind of like Kansas too. So, but I hope North Carolina wins. if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I probably would put my money on Kansas. But you know what? Against Duke, I would have put my money on Duke, and that would have been wrong as well. So you never know.
Right.
That's why the NCAA tournament's, will continue and continues to be one of the best sporting events, because it's kind of the ultimate truth serum, right? Because it was supposed to be a down year for the ACC this year, right? So it was a down year, and meanwhile they had 2 teams in the Final Four and like 3 or 4 in the Final 8. So it's like, yeah, I guess that's a down year. So
yeah, it's pretty neat. It's just a great time of year. It's such a fun event, and it's, I remember as a little kid, I grew up in Connecticut, and we used to say the only sport we had was UConn basketball growing up, and that was when it was just coming around and starting to really be competitive. And we had no other professional teams. The Hartford Whalers moved out, as we affectionately called them, Hartford Failers at the time, and so we had UConn, and just growing up watching them play was amazing. My brother and my sister went there. I love this time of year. I love that event. It's awesome. I
love sports analogies in business too, like you said. So I mean, it is, you can learn so much from just coaching, from following great coaches, and then also sports analogy from Connecticut. I'm pretty sure, like ESPN, the only reason ESPN was created was because there was a bunch of UConn fans that wanted to be able to watch basketball in other parts of the country. And they created a sports network.
So I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, and Bristol is right down the road. I mean, it's about 2 towns over. It's like New Britain, and then Bristol, I think, is a couple of towns over. And so it's right down the street almost from where I grew up. And so they have a big influence in that area. Yeah.
Well, great to be with you. Super excited to work with you, and super excited to talk to you today. You guys have got a great firm, LNC Equity Partners, fantastic lower middle market firm. Like you said, not afraid to roll up your sleeves. You guys are very passionate and active investors and involved with your companies, and it's great to see. And we learned from you guys. So thank you for your time today.
No, thank you, Phil. I really appreciate the time. Great questions. Rick, always good to see you. And the last shameless plug I'll give, and it's not for me, it's for you guys. You guys did a great assignment for us, raised $62 million in capital, and it was a wonderful, flawless execution. And couldn't thank the partnership that we've got with you guys at Rush Street, and really just thankful for the relationship that we've built, and look forward to doing many deals with you guys from here on out. And again, thanks for your time today.
All right. Well, thanks. All right. Thanks, Bart. Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Commercial Debt Doctors. We would like to thank our guest, Mark Raterman from LNC Partners. Please visit lnc-partners.com for more information on this fantastic and dynamic private equity firm. Hey, if you enjoyed what you heard today on the Commercial Debt Doctors podcast, we would encourage you to not be a spectator. Join in, comment, like, and subscribe, and listen to other episodes of Commercial Debt Doctors. And most importantly, if you subscribe, you'll be alerted when we make more episodes of our dynamic and exciting podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. And again, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon. Have a great day.